If you, like, hold a dormant flower bulb in the palm of your hand, it doesn't really look like a living thing at all.
No, not even a little bit.
Right. It feels like a stone or, I don't know, maybe a crumpled up piece of brown paper. There's just zero visual evidence of life.
Yeah, if you had no background in botany, your very first instinct would probably be to just toss it right in the trash.
Exactly.
Mm.
Because it's brittle, it's dry, and it is completely unresponsive to everything around it.
To the naked eye, it basically mimics death perfectly.
Yeah.
The organism has essentially sealed itself off. It shuts down all of its outward-facing functions just to preserve this microscopic core of vitality hidden deep inside.
And it's that exact disguise, right? That incredible biological disappearing act that we're doing a deep dive into today.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. So our focus today is this single, highly specific source that just crossed our desk. It's a short blog post published today, actually, August 12th, 2026.
Right.
And the title is Notes on Gardening, Part 984, The Long-Forgotten Rain Lily. And it's written by an author who just goes by the name Eng.
It's a remarkable little document, honestly. The subject is the zephyranthes-rosea.
The pink rain lily, right?
Exactly, the pink rain lily.
So our mission today isn't just to give you a dry botany lesson. We are going to unpack the story of this specific plant.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on here than just gardening.
Definitely. We want to explore how this super brief diary entry about a backyard plant actually reveals, some really profound insights about resilience, assumption, and the kind of subjective choices we make when we're trying to nurture something.
Whether that's a plant or, a new project at work or even a relationship.
Absolutely.
Because the post acts as this perfect microcosm of the human experience of caretaking. In just a few paragraphs, Eng gives us a window into this complete life cycle of, intention, neglect, accidental salvation, and the
sudden urge to control everything.
Yes, the overwhelming urge to micromanage.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way this narrative starts out is something I think pretty much every single person listening to us right now can relate to.
Oh, totally.
It starts with this completely unplanned acquisition. Eng writes about picking up this rain lily during a sale.
Yeah, an impulse buy.
Right. And Eng specifically references an older post, part 639, noting that the plant was bought basically for the purpose of, quote, evaluating this plant species.
Which is such a funny phrase. Evaluating this plant species is an intensely clinical way to describe buying a flower on sale.
Right. It completely strips away the romance of gardening.
It really does. It replaces it with this very metric-driven mindset. Like, the plant wasn't acquired out of a deep desire to cultivate something beautiful.
No, it was a test subject.
Exactly. It was acquired as data.
And that clinical detachment kind of sets the stage for what happens next, right? Because almost immediately, this so-called evaluation process just hits a wall.
Life gets in the way.
Exactly. Eng admits to not paying much attention to the plant at all, deciding to just let nature take its course.
Right, which in practical terms just meant occasionally remembering to water it.
Yeah, occasionally. And then an environmental crisis hits. So last year, there was this massive heat wave.
Yeah, a really brutal one.
And the plant wilts. It just completely shrivels up. And looking at this, crispy little remainder in the pot, Eng assumes it didn't survive.
Right. The evaluation is basically deemed a failure.
Which is such a common psychological trap, right?
Oh, absolutely. The assumption of failure based entirely on just a snapshot of visible distress.
Yeah.
Because biologically, the plant reacted to an extreme environmental stressor, the heat wave, in the exact way its evolution told it to.
It retreated.
It retreated. But human perception looks at that retreat and instantly labels it as final. Like, oh, it's dead.
I look at this and I just see this direct parallel to how we operate in our daily lives. Think about how many times you listening right now have bought something with incredibly high intentions.
Oh, all the time.
Like maybe you download this super complex new productivity app, or you buy a really expensive hobby kit. Let's say you decide you're going to master watercolor painting.
Yes, the classic aspirational hobby.
Right. You buy the expensive brushes, that nice cold press paper, the fancy pigments.
Yeah.
You are completely ready to evaluate this new hobby.
And then a life heat wave hits.
Exactly. Work demands double, or, the kids get sick, or you have this sudden financial stressor.
The environmental pressure in your ecosystem just spikes.
Precisely. And the watercolor kit, it gets shoved straight into a closet.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind.
And then a month later, you look at that unopened box and you think, well, that failed. I guess I'm not a painter. I guess I just lack discipline.
You assume the project is dead because it wilted under the pressure of your schedule.
Yeah, exactly. But I also want to, push back on Eng's initial framing here for a second.
Okay, sure.
Because Eng says, I let nature take its course. Is letting nature take its course just a gardener's polite, sort of pseudo-philosophical excuse for simply forgetting?
That's a very fair question.
Right. I mean, if you buy something specifically to evaluate it, just abandoning it to a heat wave seems like terrible methodology.
It certainly reads as a, post hoc justification for neglect, like, oh, I meant to do that.
Right.
However, we should probably differentiate the plant's biological response from your watercolor analogy a bit.
Okay, how so?
Well, when a human abandons a hobby under stress, we often experience all this guilt, right? Self-judgment, this conscious narrative of failure.
Oh, totally. The shame spiral.
Exactly. We don't enter true dormancy. We just procrastinate while stressing out about it.
That is painfully accurate.
But the plant, on the other hand, is executing this highly sophisticated survival mechanism, and it's doing it without any emotional baggage.
So the plant is actually succeeding at survival while the gardener thinks it's failing at growing.
What's fascinating here is that this initial neglect, regardless of the intention behind it, actually sets the stage for a pure natural experiment.
Well, I see.
Because by completely failing to coddle the plant, Eng accidentally tested the absolute baseline of the rain lily's endurance.
Like finding out what it can handle on its own.
Exactly. Because at a cellular level, during a heat wave, a plant experiences a severe drop in turgor pressure.
Turgor pressure.
Yeah, that's the internal water pressure inside the plant cells that actually keeps the stems upright and the leaves rigid.
Got it.
So to prevent total dehydration through transpiration, the plant closes its stomata, which are those microscopic pores on its leaves.
Basically holding its breath.
Kinda, yeah. And when that isn't enough, it initiates leaf abscission. It intentionally cuts off the nutrient supply to its own leaves, letting them crisp up and die just to save the core.
Wow. It is actively amputating its own solar panels to save a battery.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it, yes.
That's incredible.
And when humans overcare for organisms or projects, we often mask this natural resilience. We artificially prop them up with constant watering or micromanagement.
We don't let them show what they can do.
Exactly. By stepping back, Eng actually allowed the zephyranthes-rosea to demonstrate its built-in, unmediated response to extreme stress.
So the heat wave wasn't the end of the evaluation at all.
Not at all. It was a crucible that revealed the organism's true nature.
Which really completely shifts how we view the timeline of care. Like, the assumption of death was really just a misdiagnosis of a defense mechanism.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the next phase of Eng's journal. So, the plant is completely wilted. The evaluation is presumed dead.
Right.
But crucially, Eng doesn't throw the bulb away.
Which is lucky.
Super lucky. The pot containing this supposedly dead bulb is simply moved to a shaded area on the backyard balcony and just forgotten about.
And moving it to the shade, even if it was just a passive, thoughtless action, it lowered the ambient soil temperature.
So it stopped it from cooking in the sun.
Exactly. It prevented the bulb itself from baking. It was a minimal intervention, but a totally vital one.
And it sets up this truly comical sequence of triggers for rebirth.
It really is funny.
So Eng is just doing household chores, right? Specifically washing the backyard balcony. And the runoff, like the accidental splash from washing the floor, happens to hit this forgotten pot.
Just a total accident.
And this completely arbitrary moment of accidental watering happens to coincide perfectly with the arrival of the ambient rainy season.
A total convergence of external stimuli. Because remember, the plant is buried in the soil. It's entirely blind to the world.
Right, it doesn't know what month it is.
No. It is relying solely on chemical signaling to understand its environment.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the moment the shade, the accidental splash from a chore, and the ambient humidity of the rainy season all combined.
The rain lily woke up.
Yes. Eng writes that this, quote, dormant plant managed to sprout again with new leaves from dormancy. The plant wasn't dead.
Not at all.
An accidental chore saved the entire experiment. But mechanically, how does a bulb sitting in dry dirt know that a splash of soaky water from a balcony wash means it's time to wake up?
It all comes down to a really delicate balance of plant hormones, specifically abscisic acid and gibberellins.
Okay, abscisic acid.
Yeah. During the heat wave, The plant basically flooded its own tissues with abscisic acid. Think of it as the chemical enforcer of dormancy.
Okay.
It inhibits growth and keeps the seed, or in this case the bulb, locked in a state of suspended animation.
So it stops it from making a mistake.
Exactly. It prevents the plant from making a foolish gamble and sprouting when there clearly isn't enough water to sustain new leaves.
It's the chemical equivalent of, like, locking the vault doors.
Yes, perfect analogy. And those vault doors stay locked until the environmental cues forcefully degrade that abscisic acid.
Which is where the balcony wash comes in.
Right. When Aang washed the balcony, that splash of water penetrated the soil, and moisture physically leaches abscisic acid away from the plant tissues.
Oh, wow. It literally washes it away.
It does. And simultaneously, the ambient humidity of the rainy season is signaling that the overall environment is broadly hospitable again.
So it's safe to come out.
Right. So as the abscisic acid levels plummet, the bulb begins to synthesize gibberellic acid.
And what does that one do?
That's the hormone responsible for cell elongation and growth. So the plant didn't rise from the dead by magic. It executed this highly pre-programmed biochemical sequence triggered by a random change in moisture.
The optics of death were just a waiting room.
I love that. Yes.
We are so obsessed with visible outputs,
Yeah.
the leaves, the flowers, the daily metrics of success, that we completely misunderstand the active work of preservation happening beneath the surface.
It really demands that we reconsider our definitions of productivity, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Because dormancy is an intensely active, highly strategic state. The zephyranthes-rosea didn't fail during the heat wave.
Right.
It executed a brilliant maneuver to draw all its vital energy down beneath the soil. It sacrificed superficial operations, because maintaining them would have resulted in true systemic death.
And if we map that biological reality onto the human experience, I mean, it fundamentally changes how we view our own periods of stagnation.
Absolutely.
Like, you might have a creative passion, right? A writing project or a side business that you just haven't touched in 3 years.
Yeah.
And you look at the lack of output, the lack of visible leaves, and you just declare the dream dead.
You are diagnosing a lack of gibberellic acid as a systemic failure.
Exactly. But perhaps you've simply drawn your energy down to the core just to survive a really demanding season of life.
Like a new job, or raising a child, or managing grief.
Yeah. The core is still intact. And the trigger that wakes it up might not be this meticulously planned intervention.
Right. In Aang's case, it wasn't a curated application of specialized fertilizer.
No, it was the runoff from washing a balcony.
Which is just brilliant. The catalyst for revival is often entirely decoupled from our deliberate intentions.
It's so random.
It is. In our own lives, a completely unrelated activity can provide the exact chemical shift we need to break a dry spell.
Just a change of scenery.
Yeah. You visit a museum in a new city, or you have a serendipitous conversation with a stranger on a train.
Or you take up rock climbing instead of painting.
Exactly. And suddenly the ambient humidity of your life changes. The abscisic acid washes away, and that dormant project from 3 years ago sprouts a new leaf.
Because the conditions shifted, the cues aligned, and the core responded.
Yes.
So my abandoned watercolor kit might just be waiting for me to wash the metaphorical balcony.
Well, provided the paints haven't literally dried into bricks.
Yeah,
the conceptual framework absolutely holds.
that's amazing. But that actually forces us to ask a really difficult question.
Oh.
Once the organism resurrects itself entirely on its own, what is the caretaker actually for?
Ah, yes. The existential crisis of the gardener.
Right. Because Aang is entirely surprised by this discovery. The post details how, upon seeing these new sprouts, Aang immediately moves the plant to a, quote, new microclimate.
Right.
And in this new spot, Aang notes that the plant, quote, seems to thrive on its own.
So the organism has found its equilibrium again. That new microclimate, which is likely offering the right balance of indirect sunlight and ambient moisture, is now supporting its natural growth patterns. And it's doing it without requiring intense human management.
It's a huge success story. The forgotten bulb has triumphed over extreme adversity.
A true survivor.
But the narrative takes a sharp turn here, and honestly, it's the part of the post that genuinely made me scratch my head.
Oh, the repotting dilemma.
Yes. Because now that the plant is visibly thriving on its own, Aang decides it is time to forcefully intervene.
Right.
The post states, this is probably a good time to transplant the rain lily to a dedicated pot with the right potting mix.
The inevitable, almost gravitational return of human management.
I really have to question this impulse, though. I mean, If the plant has just definitively proven that it possesses the biological mechanics to survive a brutal heat wave completely on its own,
Right.
and if it is currently thriving autonomously in this new microclimate, why risk uprooting it?
It seems counterintuitive.
Why rip it out of the dirt that it just miraculously conquered? Because Aang is agonizing over two highly specific options for this new pot.
The soil debate.
Yeah, a sandy potting mix harvested from the wild versus the, quote, usual one with rice husk. Aren't we massively overcomplicating the situation?
This raises an important question, and I think it speaks to the central tension in any act of cultivation, whether it's agricultural or managerial.
Okay, what is that tension?
It is the conflict between trusting an organism's natural autonomy and fulfilling the deeply ingrained human desire to optimize, curate, and ultimately claim ownership of the outcome.
Wow. So we see something surviving without us, and it literally makes us uncomfortable.
Yes. We can't leave well enough alone.
We really can't.
Aang watched this plant perform a masterclass in survival, but leaving it in the random, forgotten pot where it achieved this survival feels incomplete to the caretaker's mind.
Like they didn't do their job.
Exactly. The caretaker's identity is tied to providing ideal conditions, not merely adequate ones.
That makes so much sense.
And if you look closely at the two soil options Aang is debating, this isn't just a trip to the garden center versus a trip to the beach.
Yeah.
No, it's a debate over edaphic factors.
The deific factors.
Yeah, the physical and chemical conditions of the soil and what they represent conceptually.
Break down those edaphic factors for us then. Like, what is the actual difference to the plant between wild sand and rice husks?
Well, the sandy mix harvested from the wild represents natural friction. Sandy soil has a really high silica content, and it drains incredibly fast.
So it doesn't hold water well.
Right, and it doesn't hold nutrients well either. Choosing this mix is basically an attempt to mimic the endemic, rugged environment the zephyranthes might encounter in nature.
Okay.
It forces the plant's root system to work harder, pushing deeper to find water, which, ironically, builds a more structurally resilient plant. And it prevents root rot by ensuring water never pools around the bulb.
So it's essentially trusting the ruggedness the plant just demonstrated.
Precisely. On the other hand, the usual one with rice husk represents cultivated agriculture.
The pampered option.
Exactly. Rice husks are really high in organic matter.
Right.
They improve soil aeration, but they also retain moisture in a very predictable, spongy way.
Yeah.
It's the human attempt to engineer a perfectly comfortable, low-friction environment.
So Aang is debating whether to treat the plant like a feral survivor that needs to stay tough or a pampered pet that deserves luxury after a hard time.
That's a great way to put it. And the biological irony here is that moving a plant that is adapted to harsh conditions into a nutrient-rich, moisture-retaining, perfect soil often kills it.
Wait, really? The luxury soil kills it?
Yes, because rain lilies evolved to survive dry spells and then bloom after sudden inundations.
Ah.
If you put a bulb that is adapted for drought into a spongy rice husk mix that constantly holds moisture against its base, you invite fungal pathogens.
And it rots.
The bulb rots. The attempt to provide luxury creates a lethal environment.
Wow. The danger of loving something to death.
Exactly.
But beyond just the soil types, there is the physical act of moving it, right? Isn't transplanting it dangerous in itself?
Oh, transplant shock is a severe physiological trauma.
I knew it.
Yeah. When you pull a plant from its soil, you rip off its microscopic root hairs.
And those are important.
They're the primary structures responsible for water and nutrient uptake.
Oh, no.
You also strip away the localized microbiome of beneficial bacteria and fungi that the plant has carefully cultivated around its root zone.
So you're basically resetting all its hard work.
You plunge the organism into a state of acute stress. It has to expend massive amounts of energy just to rebuild its root architecture before it can even think about focusing on leaves or flowers again.
So Aang is taking a massive, potentially lethal risk in the pure pursuit of optimization.
Yes, unfortunately.
The plant proved it didn't need the gardener to survive. In fact, it survived despite the gardener.
Exactly.
Transplanting it into a dedicated pot with the right mix feels like the gardener's way of forcibly reinserting themselves into the narrative.
It's an ego thing.
Yeah. It's a way of saying, you survived on your own, sure, but your future thriving will be attributed to my curation.
It is the caretaker reclaiming agency. And honestly, you see this exact behavioral pattern in corporate environments constantly.
Oh my gosh, yes. The classic management restructuring.
Right.
Imagine a team at a company. The director goes away on a month-long sabbatical, the equivalent of the heat wave.
Right.
The team is left without their usual oversight. And at first they scramble, but then they figure things out.
They adapt.
They streamline their communication, they cut out unnecessary meetings, and they find a new, highly efficient way to operate. They are thriving in their new autonomous microclimate.
They've developed their own structural resilience, just like the plant.
Exactly. Then the director returns, sees the team operating beautifully, and instead of letting them run, immediately announces, "Great job surviving, everyone. Now let's reorganize the reporting structure and migrate all our workflows into this new enterprise software system."
The rice husk software system.
And yes, the rice husk software.
Designed to retain metrics and provide a comfortable illusion of control for management while actively disrupting the fine root hairs of the team's actual productivity.
That is so spot on. We just have this desperate need to be the architects of success.
We really do.
Even when the system, whether it's a botanical organism or a team of graphic designers, has already demonstrated that it knows how to win on its own terms, we intervene. It's the whole "if it ain't broke, fix it until it is" mentality.
It is. But to be fair, it stems from a complex place.
What do you mean?
Well, it isn't always malicious ego, but often comes from a genuine place of care. We intervene because we want to provide the best.
Right.
But our definition of the best is often totally uncalibrated to the hard-won resilience of the thing we are trying to nurture.
We confuse our desire to curate with the organism's actual physiological or structural needs.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We've extracted a massive amount of biology and psychology from my 150-word blog post today.
We really have.
We started by examining an unplanned clinical acquisition. A bulb bought simply for evaluation that was promptly written off as a complete failure when it wilted under the pressure of a heat wave.
A victim of human misperception, where an active biological defense mechanism was misdiagnosed as death.
Right. We then explored the incredible mechanics of dormancy. We learned how abscisic acid locks the vault doors to preserve the core.
Yes.
And how a totally accidental trigger like the runoff from washing a balcony can dilute those inhibitors, spike growth hormones, and wake an organism up when the ambient conditions finally align.
It serves as a reminder that vital energy often remains intact beneath the surface, completely hidden from our obsession with visible metrics, just waiting for an unscripted shift in the environment.
Absolutely. And finally, we confront the thriving, resurrected specimen, which is now facing the severe physiological trauma of transplant shock.
The repotting.
All because the gardener cannot resist the urge to optimize, debating edaphic factors like wild sand versus rice husks, and ultimately projecting their own need for control onto an organism that has already mastered its own survival.
It presents a remarkably complete loop, really. It forces us to examine the line between nurturing an organism and managing our own anxieties.
For you listening to this, I invite you to take a mental inventory of your own life. Look at the projects, the relationships, or the ambitions that have just gone quiet.
The things on the shelf.
Yeah, the things you mentally shoved into a closet because a heat wave of stress made them appear lifeless. Recognize that they might not be dead.
No, they may simply be in a highly strategic state of dormancy.
They might just be waiting for a subtle shift in their microclimate. A random conversation, a change of scenery, or a splash of accidental inspiration to wash away the inhibitors.
Because the core is often much more resilient than the optics suggest.
And when those projects do sprout again, when they find their own autonomous way to thrive, that is when you face the hardest test.
The urge to intervene.
Exactly. Which leads to the final lingering question I want to leave you with today.
Okay.
If a simple rain lily can endure extreme heat, protect its core through complete superficial shutdown, and regenerate entirely through accidental neglect, might our most intense, agonizing interventions be fundamentally misguided?
That's a tough one to swallow.
It is. When we desperately agonize over the equivalent of wild sand versus rice husks in our own lives, when we micromanage our teams and meticulously curate our environments, are we actually fulfilling the complex needs of the things we are trying to grow?
Right.
Or are we simply soothing our own quiet terrors about a world that functions perfectly well outside of our control?
The ultimate question of cultivation, right?
Yeah.
Who is the garden really for?
Next time you find yourself holding something that looks entirely lifeless, dry, and brittle, remember the rain lily. It might just be waiting for the rain. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.